you need to do, and as a data controller, what is it that you need to do. So as we look at in the cloud environment, we are saying that there are two parties that are going to come in the picture. One is the data controller, that is the client, the tenant, who's going to have data based in cloud, while there will be somebody whose data processor, that is our the cloud service provider. But this line is too thin, and it changes as the data moves from one country to another. And that is the biggest risk. So having inadequate legislation. Second is regulatory stance, which is changing constantly. Third is the extant laws which are prevailing in different parts of the country. Although EU is working very hard on trying to bring about uniformity, still they are not there. So that is important aspect. Fourth is about portability of the data from the technology perspective, whether data can be ported from one cloud service provider to another. Fifth is, are we in a position to manage the disaster and business continuity? Because if such kind of a data, which is extremely sensitive, which is coming under the radar of the regulator so closely, is it safe? If tomorrow there is a disaster, how am I going to recover it? The past records show that on and around 420 minutes was the data lapse, or the time for which the service providers were at default. But is it going to reduce? Yes, going forward it is going to reduce, because it is average around, like best of the service providers, they had only 3 minutes of data data lag, while some of them had about 400 minutes of lag. Going back to that, how are we going to manage the disaster recovery? What is it that I need to have, what kind of controls I need to have in place is very important, and that's where the legislature and agreement is going to come in the picture, and that is where the role of the service provider and the tenant is going to come in the picture, and that we will have to look at very carefully. And so these are 5 topics which I thought I'll flag in the beginning, where we don't have answers yet. We are looking at it. We are seeing how the world is moving towards it, and looking at taking the commonsensical approach and ensuring that the residual risk is minimum.
So very good, Padmaja. You have touched upon very comprehensive risk part. So fact remains is that we have outsourced the work. We have not outsourced the risk. So ultimately, you, though you feel that we have outsourced, you are not out of the radar of risk. Okay, fine. So I have Costa from Symantec, and they are one of the very prominent solution provider. So can you please tell to the audience that what kind of, why this traditional control in terms of security, why it is not good enough when you move from traditional hosting to the cloud hosting?
No, absolutely. I think it's been a learning experience for vendors such as us. I think traditionally, and I will try to draw this importance of why you can't afford to look at security controls for cloud in a traditional way. You secured your physical infrastructure, or for that matter, even your private virtual infrastructure internally. And I'll draw that from a couple of instances of breaches that we saw last year. And then I'll draw from our experience in working with our customers, how they look at security, and how we intend to provide the solution in a holistic way. So last year, I believe everyone would have heard about a lot of breaches, very big scale breaches, like you heard about Sony, you heard about Home Depot, Target, and the big ones really where a lot of fines were involved because of violations of laws such as data privacy, data protection was JP Morgan Chase. So JP Morgan Chase effectively lost their customer information. They did say, look, we absolve all our customers from any financial losses, but that is their job, right? That's what it's supposed to do in the first place. So what's going on there? And if you look at JP Morgan Chase, I believe they spent close to $5 billion over a period of time on security technologies. So how were they breached? And the answer is very simple, right? So they spend on traditional security, but probably not on cyber security. Right? So moving to my favorite breach of last year was this code spaces. I believe, how many of you have heard about this code spaces breach? Right. So code spaces, if you didn't know, it was a cloud-based code and project management solution, very popular with especially technology startups, etc. They were breached, right? So they were breached in a very non-traditional way. Someone took control, hackers took control of their cloud service provider management console, and asked ransom money. So they didn't pay because they couldn't afford to pay. It's a small company. So they started to delete their customer data. They deleted, Amazon machine instances, and eventually cloud spaces went bankrupt. They couldn't even afford the thought of facing legal lawsuit. So cloud space, in my opinion, two things, right? Just to summarize. So what has changed? So the threat surfaces have changed. So traditionally, you will look at security as security on guest. But now there are this management plane that you have to protect. You got to look at how the data is exchanged between your different guest instances. The other thing that I learned from the code spaces example is that they didn't have a business continuity plan in place, right? So they were hosted on a very popular cloud service provider. They probably assumed, you know what, they provide certain level of compliance, so we are secure. They provide high availability, business disaster recovery. But clearly, when you go for a cloud service provider, you must understand what does the SLA protect you from, right? So it's not just sufficient worrying about guests, but you got to look at what is your responsibility as a customer versus the CSP's responsibility. So I was talking about these threat services and attack vectors, right? So when you talk about attack vectors, these hackers are no longer these yuppie college kids who sit there and get thrilled out of hacking. It's an organized crime. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So we cannot no longer afford to have a small IT security team which effectively can fight with this organized crime. Right, so that's my learning from all this cybersecurity. Now, working with our own customers, very interesting. We were in the process of reimagining our software for the data center security. And so we talk about, you know about software-defined data center, right? So everything is software-defined, your servers, your storage, your network. So we also believe now that vendors such as us have to evolve our security and make it even software-defined security. So we were interviewing our customers. We asked questions. There was this survey that we had. How do you look at security for your virtual infrastructure, your private cloud, public cloud differently from your traditional security? One of the key questions. They said, no, nothing different. We just look at our traditional way. Why is that? Look, the IT has evolved, right? Through, Suva mentioned about the speed. So why do you go for cloud? Speed, flexibility, and cost. So IT has evolved. There's a lot of automation already in place, but IT security hasn't evolved. There are not a lot of tools and technologies that help IT security to actually keep pace with this. So a lot of effort is going on with the large software vendors such as us and our competitors in making that whole process of providing security at the time of provisioning, right? So to summarize, in my opinion, I think you cannot no longer afford to look at security in a traditional way. Be aware what is the threat surface, more than the guess, what else you want to protect. Have additional controls such as file integration monitoring, secure config assessment, vulnerability, and tie it all in. And I think one thing that everybody misses is you have all these controls in place. How do you know how secure you are, right? So penetration testing is equally important. And most importantly, look, you're going to be breached. You can never completely protect yourself. So if you are breached, how quickly you come to know? In case of JP Morgan Chase, they didn't know, right? And they didn't know what was the intent and extent of the breach. They first said, 1 million. As it stands, 65% of American bank account holders were breached. So with that thought, I will pass it on back to
Very good. Joseph Juran, I think so many of you may be knowing him. Joseph Juran is a guru in quality. He said once that we all believe in God. Rest other all need to bring data. Now how pure this data is now question which has just arisen. Second thought is, luckily or unluckily in India, in banking sector or any other sector, like what laws existing in US and Europe, that you have to mandatorily disclose what went wrong in your organization if some data breach is there. We have yet not reached to that serious stage, and we all know how damaging it is. So even though there are breaches happening in India, it's not coming in limelight because of so many reasons. Okay, but at the same time, when we travel with somebody overnight in second class, especially in train, next day morning when we both reach to a destination, that guy will come to, he must have entire information from where we started our study and where we are working, what is my package. That is not the case when you go to US or anywhere. It's very difficult to ask someone's name, because we all, the same people, those who are throwing the information very openly in public in India, we just become skeptical to share anything when you go to other countries. With this thought, I would like to ask Mr. Rajan, because you are controlling a huge database across the world. So what kind of demand from business you get to put control around the data or the information what you are storing? So what kind of control with respect to compliance or risk or governance per se?
Every company has different requirements, okay? Every company has auditors. Most of you are sitting here. And they have a framework around which they would like to audit a company, okay? Now, what has changed though is it is no longer just the data. The access points have changed. It is no longer the laptop. It is the tab. It is the mobile. You talked about people using smartphone without knowing what is behind, what is at work behind, right? And how do you go about resolving it, right? Now, how many of you know Rajnikant, right? Quite a few of you, right? He is the counterpart of Amitabh Bachchan in South. So, what
will you take as an offense?
No, just point to point. So, sorry?
You're okay in here, not in South.
Oh, I'm from South, so I'm based at Bangalore. So, there was a Facebook post from him, whether you're talking on a mobile, whether it costs a few thousand or 50,000, you're still just talking, right? Whether you eat food in a dhaba or a 5-star, you're eating just food. How does it matter? The cost really doesn't matter, correct? Now similarly, when you go to a hospital, whether you want to visit a general practitioner or a specialist, that is where the difference lies. Now, see, so what you're looking at a cloud offering currently is who can offer me a complete infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. Okay? Mr. Sinha outlined what is under those brackets, and now I'm not going to go there again, right? But it differs from vendor to vendor. What is the completeness of the solution that you get? There are service providers who offer you the complete stack. Now, there have been a lot of talk about accountability, risk, disaster recovery. See, you are auditors, right? It doesn't matter to you whether I'm accessing it from a tab or a mobile phone or a laptop. One of the key things that I have worked with my customers is you are worried about who accessed what, from where did he access, who approved that access, among a lot of other things that you do, right? And generally when companies you go to throw a lot of reports to you or emails to you, right? Now, the new governance that you are seeing evolving in the market, right, is all about providing you the right reports in the BI format. How can companies reduce the amount of time and effort that you spend with company? How do you come out with a better requirement for a company to become more accountable, right? So, as Larry says, you need to worry about the two biggest applications. We make hundreds of applications, but the two key applications are your customer-facing application and your employee applications. Both are the biggest, priority for most organizations. Now, I make it available from which device,